We were asked to tell a story about an incident we had in North Attleboro on February 7th, 1982, approximately 2 o'clock in the morning. It was a very cold night, and we had received orders, basically, that required us to check every vehicle that was stopped in the rest areas, on the side of the roads, breakdown lanes, to make sure nobody would freeze to death, because it was very, very cold. So I had the Route 95 patrol in 495, and I was in the process of swinging the road, as they called it. Basically, in the early hours of your shift, you would swing the road, checking everything along the way just to make sure you didn't miss anything. And again, you would do it also when you ended your patrol, just to make sure there was nobody out there that you missed. So I was doing a swing of the road in North Attleboro, and I pulled into the rest area, and there was a green station wagon pulled to the right side of the rest area. As I pulled behind the car, I didn't have a spotlight that worked on my cruiser. I had what they call a pool cruiser. My own cruiser, had been totaled in the breakdown lane in Attleboro a month before. So I didn't have my issued shotgun or shotgun ammunition. Again, the cruiser that I was using, the spotlight didn't work. The interior light didn't work. I had to use a flashlight to write a ticket. It just was totally a mess. There were no alley lights. So as I pulled behind this car, I noticed two people in it, two men in the front seat of the car, and a Doberman running back and forth. It was a station wagon. Back seat was folded down, and the dog was running back and forth in the back. So what I had done was I drove past the wagon, turned around so I was facing the wrong way so that my lights could shine in on the passengers and I could see what was going on. So I approached the car, and I asked the two guys what they were doing, and they said they were just resting. And at the time, I didn't really place the two of them in that car. I thought that maybe one of them belonged to another car or something, and they were having a conversation in one of the cars. I asked them for ID, and they both handed me a paper New York license, which was at the time valid. One of the licenses had a picture stapled to it. The other one didn't, which, again, I thought was a little unusual. I asked them for the registration, and the passenger reached for the registration in the glove box. Again, I thought that was unusual because I'm expecting the driver to give me the registration. As I was talking to them, when I first walked up to the car, the passenger had his hand inside of a vest type garment. And I also noticed a small duffel bag on the floor near his feet. The dog was agitated, barking, snarling in the back. So I asked the driver whose car it was, and he said it was his girlfriend's. Again, I thought it was unusual because the car was registered in Massachusetts, and they both handed me New York licenses. So he said, "This is my girlfriend's car." And I had a thing that I used to do where I fold up the registration, and I said to him, "Well, what's her name?" And he said, "Lucinda Keith." And where does she live? Cambridge. How long have you been going out? 6 months. What's her phone number? And when I said that, he hesitated. And I said, what's her phone number? And he said, I don't remember it. And I said, well, you don't remember her phone number? You've been going out for 6 months. I thought it was a little unusual. So I went back to my cruiser, turned around so that now I was in back of them again and I could see the backs of their heads. And I wanted to run an M&W on them, missing and wanted. And at the same time this was going on, we were on a code 1, which means we were not supposed to transmit because there was a car chase going on up in Concord. So I didn't want to use my cruiser troop radio, so I went to the headquarters radio. We used to call it the old radio, and I called headquarters for that M&W rather than Framingham. And so I gave them the license data on both of them and the registration. The 2 licenses came back no record. The car came back no response. Back in those days, no response could mean anything. It could mean the plate was new. It could mean expired. It could mean, back then it was anything. It just meant there was no information on that plate. We found out later that everything was phony. There was no such person. It was a mail drop. There was no such person as Lucinda Keith. The licenses came back, no record. We later found out that both licenses were phony. They were issued to non-existent people. Again, we didn't know that at the time. I felt extremely anxious at the time, the spidey sense. I really felt something was wrong with this car, but I didn't know what at the time. So I did something that I very rarely did, which is call for backup. Fortunately, Mike Crosby was returning from was it a drunk team or
saturation patrol. Alcohol-related driving that they were looking for.
Typically, at this time of the night, there would be nobody out there. Basically, you had your other patrol who could have been pretty much anywhere. But because there was a few guys returning, number one, we found Mike. Number two, he offered to go down, which again could be unusual at the time. He was on his way home. So he dropped what he was doing and headed down. He pulled in next to me, and we discussed it. I said, I think something's going on with these guys. I want to take a look at the passenger.
And if I can say, I remember the way Paul spoke, is anyone near the 95 rest area?
Exactly.
Could you swing down? I said, sure. Again, I was on my way home from a saturation patrol. And I remember going down with lights on, no siren, lights on, just in case anyone saw me go by at a high rate or whatever. But I remember as I got about a quarter of a mile before the rest area, I shut the blue lights off. Only because it was in Paul's voice, and again, you have that sense that something could go wrong, so why spook them, perhaps? And then I got out and asked Paul what was going on.
And they had been turning around and looking, and you could see they were talking and back and forth. So basically I said, I want to take a look at the passenger. I think he's got something. And I didn't know whether he was hiding something, whether there was drugs, whether I didn't know, but I wanted to focus on the passenger.
And if I recall, I think when I came in, I put, because of the condition of the cruiser you were using that had no lights, I think, if I recall, that I put my spotlight on them to give a little bit of light into the interior of their green Plymouth station wagon.
Right.
But basically, the station wagon was position 1, Paul was behind it 2, I came in at an angle so that I was more or less facing the station wagon and somewhat Paul's car.
We approached the passenger, and I knocked on the window, and motioned for him to get out. The window was up at the time, and he kind of looked at the driver and knocked again. I said, "Get out of the car," and he stepped out. And
you said to watch the driver.
Before that, I had basically said to him, "What do you have here?" And I motioned towards the area where he had his hand. And he kind of brushed me away and said nothing. So I said to Mike, "Mike, watch the driver. I think this guy's got something." And I said to him, "Put your hands on your head and don't move." And I started to make a move towards where his hand had been. And I touched a bulletproof vest. And with that, he made a step back and reached for the area where his hand had been initially. At the same time, the driver literally rolled out of the front, duck walked to the back, and leaned over from the back of the car and just went boom, boom, boom. So at that point, again, I grabbed the guy that I had out of the car by the back of his neck and backed him into the woods and fired twice at the muzzle shot. You really couldn't see the driver. All you could do was see the flame, the muzzle flame. I never saw him. I basically shot at where the noise and the fire was.
Both of us.
Probably, yeah, we were both.
More Paul, because at that time, I remember threatening, while all this was going on, I said to him, "Drop your weapon and you won't get hurt. Drop your weapon, everything will be all right." And then as he shot at Paul, I headed for my cruiser. We had no portable radios. We had obviously no cell phones. And I was heading for the median strip of Route 95 because earlier, 6 months before that, Marty Stevens had been involved in a shooting, and he went to the median strip to reload. My thought was get to the median strip. If I had to shoot 6, I could reload. As I was going to the median strip, there was the large trash dumpster. I hid behind that while he shot at me, running for the dumpster. And then I was lucky enough, a break in the shooting, I ran to my cruiser and called for the help. I believe we were still in the code 1, but at that point it didn't matter.
Yeah, a lot was going on all at once. The Doberman had gotten out of the open door of the car and was running around, snapping. At some point, the shooter ran up into the woods, and I fired twice. Again, I never saw him. I was firing at a noise of somebody thump, 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 thump up in the woods, because now we were between Mike and the shooter. And I had gotten the passenger on the ground, and I determined that he had a firearm, and I took the firearm out of his waist, put it in my pocket, cuffed him.
And then dragged him over to the cruiser.
Yeah, he wouldn't get up, so I dragged him to the cruiser. Now we're in back of the cruiser instead of being between Mike and the guy that was the shooter. And within 5 minutes, we had pretty much everybody that was out there in the rest area, including Rhode Island troopers and everybody else that was in the area. We had
local police, Rhode Island, and people that were at the barracks in Foxborough that were available.
Well, what happened with the dog, kind of an unusual story. The dog, during all of the commotion, jumped back into the car, and somebody closed the door. Again, there were people coming, going. So they towed the car back to the barracks, and inside of the duffel bag, which was a mess also, there was a machine gun and a shotgun, and there were extra rounds for the guns. And then under the front seat in that small duffel bag, there was a .380 automatic and a double-edged knife. They found a little bit of drugs, very little, some kind of drugs. They found more false IDs. So basically, they got the guy that we got, Christopher King, they got him back to the barracks, and the detectives interrogated him, and they were able to find out his real name as well as the name of the shooter. Once they found the name of the shooter, they knew that it was part of a gang that killed Trooper Philip Lamonaco in New Jersey a month before. It was a very, very small, tight-knit, pretty much 7 people in the gang, called the Sam Melville-Jackson gang. And they had been responsible for killing Trooper Lamonaco in New Jersey and a bunch of bank robberies and bombings.
The attempt to blow up the Topsfield Barracks.
Topsfield Barracks was one of them.
They bombed a Eastern Airlines Electra at Logan Airport. Suffolk County Courthouse.
They did the probation department at Suffolk County Courthouse, among other things. They were mainly trying to hit what they call military industrial, that type stuff, recruiting stations, anti-government type targets. And New Jersey flew up on a helicopter that night. They flew up a Major Coe and
Colonel Pignano, I believe, came up as well.
A couple of high-ranking. We also had majors from Rhode Island at the barracks. It was pretty busy scene for a while, but they were able to identify these guys, and they were later caught in Ohio 4 years later. They caught the whole gang, all of them. They actually got the gun that was used to kill Trooper Lamonaco. They got the gun that was used to fire at us. They got bomb-making equipment that matched up to the bombings that they had done. They basically got everything, the whole bottle of wax. They swooped down on them. There was like 120 officers that swooped down on them while they were on their way to a birthday party. And they got all of them. They got the wives,
and the
children. Everybody was scooped up.
They moved around as families, as normal as could be, enrolled kids in school with false names and so forth. They were, I guess, a well-organized terrorist group, to put it.
And they had safe houses. When they shot the trooper in New Jersey, they fled. And they were gone from their safe house in 2 hours with the animals, the kids, and everything. They were gone, and they had gone to a new safe house. So they were pretty organized that way. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. And they had done bombings and bank robberies up and down the East Coast, mainly New England, but pretty much up and down, all the way down towards the Carolinas. While this was going on, I don't know about Mike, but at some point, tractor trailer hauling a full load of gasoline pulled in. I never saw it. I never saw it. As a matter of fact, I'm probably lucky that I didn't hit it with a bullet. But at some point, the driver of the truck pulled in. He was doing his logbook, and he was writing his log, and he said that he saw my cruiser in the station wagon, and then he watched it. He saw another cruiser pull in, which is Mike, and he said it was really unusual to see 2 cruisers. He said, so I put my logbook down and started to watch. And he actually saw everything. He was a good witness. He saw Lyman get out. He saw him go back, shoot. He turned around, and at the time, the driver was thinking of running him over with his truck. But Lyman actually turned around and looked at him. And he thought, well, if he shoots at me, I've got a load of gas. So what he ended up doing, which was pretty smart on his part, he actually drove out and blocked the exit to the rest area in case Lyman had taken the car. Well, this particular truck driver happened to be a deacon at his church in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, which is just over the line. Interesting about it, he went to the same church service every Sunday. This was a Sunday morning with his family, his wife and kids, at the same time, and he was the deacon for the service. Well, his wife, when he got home after this incident, said, "You've got to tell the police. You've got to call." And he called the police. They called the barracks in Foxborough, and they said, "Oh, get him back up here. We need to talk to him." So he got back. He drove up to Foxborough, and he talked with the detectives. So as a result, when he finally got home that morning, it was probably 6, 7 in the morning, his wife said to him, "Go to bed. You're not going to the services. Just go home and sleep it off for a while." So he did. So his wife and kids went to the church, and while they were at the church, someone came into the church carrying a newspaper under their arm that nobody seemed to know who the guy was. And the pastor of the church saw the guy walk in, thought it was unusual someone who would come in with a newspaper. So he, at the end of the service, where the pastor shook hands with everybody, this guy walked past him and he shook his hand. And the pastor said that identified him as Jan Lahman, who was the shooter. I can remember specifically when the shooting started. I can remember seeing a muzzle flash and hearing boom, boom, boom. And my first thought was, he's going to steal my cruiser. They say your life passes in front of you. My first thought was, he's going to steal my cruiser. My second thought was, he couldn't hit me in a million years. Why I had either of those, I'll never know to this day, but kind of unusual. My life didn't pass in front of me.
I had the same thought about stealing the cruiser, and later in the next day when I was ordered to write a letter about damage to my cruiser, and I said to the then captain that if we had a kill switch, it would have been all right. About a year before, there was an incident where I think it was a non-commissioned officer down the Cape, sent a trooper out, and the kill switch worked. The trooper couldn't start the car, and this non-commissioned officer had his buddies stealing drugs out of the Yarmouth barracks. So this captain turned to me and said, "Don't talk to me about kill switches."